Good morning. My name's Lisa Ashmore. I'm a senior lecturer at Lancaster Medical School based at Lancaster University. I'm also a clinical academic therapeutic radiographer based at Lancashire Teaching Hospitals in the Rosemere Cancer Centre. I'm going to talk to you today about sexual health and intimacy. This was a project that we ran last year, really, and it was a follow-on project to another project that we ran here at Lancaster called the Gynae Cancer Narratives Project. The Gynae Cancer Narratives Project was funded by Northwest Cancer Research, and it was a collaboration between Lancaster University and the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre. What we were aiming to do in the Gynae Cancer Narratives Project was really understand the experience of effects of radiotherapy for gynaecological cancer. So we know that radiotherapy causes erythema and desquamation on the genitals and pelvic region for more than 6 months following treatment. We know that there are psychosocial and physical symptoms, many of which are listed there. And we also know that treatment procedures have significant effects on body image and femininity, sexual functioning and fertility. So what we did in the Gynae Cancer Narratives Project was we were trying to understand how radiotherapy impacts on social, personal and sexual lives to improve the experiences of patients living with the social and personal impacts of radiotherapy. So what we did was we collected narrative accounts, so journal entries from patients of who were having gynae radiotherapy from consent to 6 months post-treatment, and we used written, and so people wrote into diaries, visual. If people wanted to draw, they could draw their diaries, or they could use other methods, or they could even voice record their diaries, and we gave people voice recorders for that. The aim was that we would develop a range of resources for use by patients and practitioners, which would include an anthology of narratives. So we were going to make a book from the narratives. So we had 16 women who recorded their experiences of radiotherapy from the start of treatment up to 6 months following the end of treatment. And they were all recruited via Clatterbridge Cancer Centre. And then because of the timing of the project, 2019 to 2022, obviously we were hit in the middle of COVID there. So we pivoted the project while there was a pause in non-interventional research at Clatterbridge, and we started to recruit people online, people who had had radiotherapy treatment for a gynae cancer at any point, ranging from less than 1 year up to 25 years, and they could have had treatment at any cancer centre. We did say in the UK, just because we have more of a sense then of what kind of treatments people had been receiving. So the data sets capture the experiences of women aged from 25 to 80 who've got a diagnosis of cervical, endometrial, ovarian or vulval cancer. One of the limitations of the study was that we sought to recruit people who had varied sexualities, patients who didn't identify as women, but we were unable to recruit in that area. So during the when I talk about the project, I do refer to everybody as women because that is how they identified. We did approach a number of groups and different charities to try and encourage a wider diversity of response, but actually all participants identified as female and white and heterosexual. As a consequence of that project, we developed a book, which I've put the main headings here. What we wanted to do was expand how people are talking about radiotherapy for gynae cancer. So we've developed this book. It leads up to a manifesto for change, which is a 10-point summary of what we think we could do with the narratives to make care better for this group of patients. The book itself is called We Need to Talk About Radiotherapy for Gynaecological Cancer, and it's framed around this sense of conversations about, because the project revealed that conversations are difficult to initiate or are easily closed down, and that actually many of the issues that people were talking about in the narratives could be resolved through careful conversation. So as I've put on here, each of the sections of the book, there's 7 sections, they were each led by a different member of the research team. Okay, and then at the end of each section, there's some questions, prompts for patients and prompts for practitioners that we think people might be able to use in support groups or in journal clubs or in staff room meetings or whatever. So we just want people to start having conversations about some of the issues that were raised. And that's what I'm doing here today, really. What I'm talking about today follows on from the chapter talking about sexual selves, that third chapter. The narratives exposed that staff often closed down conversations about sexual well-being, and that support in this area was limited. It focused on specialist teams rather than being a routine part of care. So I've just put on this slide here some of the quotes that some of the patients talked about in their narratives about sexual well-being. So here Harriet says it feels a bit like her vagina has become a medical problem, that it's her responsibility to manage, and that she's sort of lost her femininity. Jane there says that she's closer to her partner than she's ever been. They don't have sex, but they're much more tactile and really try to support each other. There were comments about using dilators, which women are patients are encouraged to use when they're having pelvic radiotherapy, but a lot of people talked about those. And then Gemma talks about struggling with any form of affection or loving because she just doesn't feel it. Her partner commented on their sex life and how he didn't know how much longer he could wait. So participants talked about owning their body, feeling attractive, and about choice. And some women described a loss of self-confidence, feeling unsexy, and for some, they didn't feel like their bodies belonged to them, feeling like an old bag or alienated due to induced infertility. Many women described wanting to have a sexual self, with some feeling guilty for this when they should be concentrating on the cancer. And the women described feeling less feminine, that their vaginas had become a medicalised problem. The women suggested that purely clinical perspectives on the use of dilators didn't acknowledge that using them is also about their relationship with their own body and their own sexual self. However, as I pointed out, Jane and others found pleasure in alternatives to vaginal sex, and their relationships changed in some positive ways, and some women felt fulfilled when they were able to have sex. So this quote from Anita really made us think that there was more we could do to support staff in having these conversations. She says it's no good asking a nurse or a doctor or a radiographer at a cancer clinic to give advice beyond their area of expertise. It wasn't fair on them. So as a follow-up to that project, we joined forces with the Society of Radiographers and a social enterprise called Me and Her, and we applied for some funding from the Economic and Social Research Council, and which was granted. And so we came together with Me and Her and the Society of Radiographers because we don't think that each practitioner can do this on their own. We need to come together to improve confidence, to share best practice, to kind of own our own embarrassment and our knowledge or our lack of knowledge. And we need to advocate for a culture shift in how we prioritise sexual well-being as an integral part of care. Me and Her, Ali and Rachel, position themselves as knowledgeable facilitators, and they guide a collaborative exploration of women's sexual pleasure through critical conversation about the lived experience of sex and pleasure. So they don't consider themselves to be experts or sexperts or educators. They don't offer instruction. Their lessons are that pleasure can be whatever we want it to be on our own terms, that there's no right or wrong. So they're just facilitators in this space. So working with Me and Her was different to many other current activities around sexual well-being in cancer because they're committed to being inclusive to the fluidity of gender diversity, expression and sexual orientation. And they really are try and avoid ableist assumptions about sexual pleasure, which I think in this context is really important. Also, they are economically inclusive. So as we've seen in many areas where we're talking about sexual health and cancer, the marketing of sex toys for women, access to related media and participation in sexual pleasure events such as those delivered through adult shops, it actually demands a significant financial resource and it's exclusionary for many. So as such, opportunities for women to explore sexual pleasure is sometimes mediated by their socioeconomic position. So working with Me and Her, we were prioritising inclusivity in all of what we were trying to achieve. So together, the Society of Radiographers, Lancaster University, and me and her, we developed a series of workshops which took a sex-critical approach to sexual well-being. So sex-critical is different to sex-positive because sex-positive regards all consensual sexual activities as fundamentally healthy, pleasurable, and it encourages sexual pleasure and experimentation. However, critiques of sex positivity raise questions about asexuality. What of the fact that many women's, indeed people's experiences of sex are traumatic, abusive, or maybe some people are just indifferent to sex? And in particular, why is the role of orgasm so prominent? And what about other forms of intimacy and loving? As you know, I keep going back to that comment by Jane about, it isn't all about penis and vagina intercourse. A lot of sex critical approaches to sexual well-being question how people might be constrained by cultural rules about what kinds of good sex or normal sex or great sex we should be aspiring to have. And despite efforts to redress the balance, representations still tend to be heteronormative, with prescriptive notions of penis and vagina penetration, and these unhelpful binaries and reductive imperatives for orgasm continue to define what constitutes sex. So in this project around gynecological cancer, we couldn't see how we could start from a position of sex positivity when, given what we'd just read about people's experiences, really made us think that there wasn't much to be positive about. So we wanted to address the questions raised from the gynae narratives, not in a capitalist way, let's not sell vibrators and promote lube, not in a heteronormative way, how can you restart penis and vagina sex, and not in a physiological or psychological way, how can we fix this medical problem, but in a way that helped practitioners talk to patients about sexual well-being in ways that suit both patients and staff, supporting feelings of intimacy with themselves or with others, feeling desired, and how to avoid external pressures to feel any of these things if they don't want to. So if you want to know more about sex critical approaches, I've put a couple of links in the slides there for you. So what were we going to do? We wanted to develop a toolkit. So we ran 3 online workshops with 15 radiographers, therapeutic radiographers from across the UK. And the aim was to understand having conversations about sex prior to, during and following radiotherapy treatment as a practice of care. A 4th in-person workshop was held with members of the group and a graphic designer to co-create resources and materials to aid conversations about sexual well-being. And a final workshop was convened with a group of patients to reflect on and further develop resource content. The workshops increased critical awareness about damaging silences when providing radiotherapy for gynecological cancer, and they promoted participants' confidence. Radiographers said they developed a network of peers and shared interests and developed skills and languages to enhance their care practices. We developed the Sexual Wellness Toolkit in collaboration in that in-person workshop and then in collaboration with patients. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these. Basically, we've got 3 things that are now available for free off the Lancaster University website. There's a set of 10 cards here that are in a plastic wallet. These hang off a lanyard, whether you can see that. And in the pack, there are a few cards that help practitioners have conversations about sexual well-being. There's diagrams, word clouds, and images. We've also put a selection of these cards in one place onto a poster. This has been designed for practitioners to put up in their clinic rooms, but it could also be used in staff rooms or other spaces. The idea is that this will eventually be downloadable, but we do have printed posters that can be sent out to people. A set of playing cards was developed with multiple audiences in mind. So they aren't playing cards because you can't play with them. However, the hope is that these might help people have conversations with a loved one, a clinician or a patient. So there's something about feeling the information in the cards and being able to kind of use those as a tactile way of initiating a conversation. They are more mixed and they include some of the same cards as the practitioner ones, but also some more details about the Gynae Narratives project and some prompts for reflection. It's fundamentally a research project, and we know there's more work to be done, but early evaluation says that people were really excited to be part of the project and have an end product. And that people are waiting to see how they can use it, but it feels like a game changer for them. So to conclude, it's the responsibility of all staff to be able to have conversations about sexual well-being. Failure to do so closes down future opportunities. Sexual well-being, and increasingly sex and cancer, is at risk of being overshadowed by sexual consumerism. Pleasure can be whatever we want it to be on our own terms, and that there is no right or wrong answer. We are advocating within the Gynae Narratives team for conversations about sexual well-being, open discussion in all areas of radiotherapy care. It's not something that happens in a clinic over there, that is your expert. It should be something we're all able to have a conversation about. Using fun and interactive workshops was a really successful way of increasing attention to sexual bodies, increasing confidence, and creating communities of practice. And co-design tools may be one way of facilitating and supporting conversations. There were lots of people to acknowledge in the project team. Of course, all of the patients and therapeutic radiographers who contributed to both of the projects. And I'll just leave you with this slide, which has got the QR code where you should be able to order copies of the book and of the cards. And thank you very much.